Thank you so much for those presentations. I think it's super nice seeing the work you've done that led up to you actually answering this open call that we had for the artistic directors for the Luleåbiennalen. But it will also be interesting for us to hear, like, what made you answer this open call? What did you find interesting with this region and this biennial?
As we said, we did the same program in Amsterdam, 2018. And one of the, let's say, activity part of the program was presenting past project. So we did presentation like this one, and it was really nice to see commonalities around our past project, this interest between public and private, but also thinking of audiences, art of the art world, how curatorial practices can also foster this type of engagement. And we never had the opportunity to do it together. So when we saw the open call, Bruno was like, hey, do you want to make this happen? But also in terms of, we had to discuss how the region was interesting for us, not knowing and not being from here, how we want to use the term periphery, because I mean, coming from Cameroon, I see Cameroon as a periphery. No, it's not a periphery, but it's seen as a periphery. But also thinking of Luleå or Norrbotten as a region that is in Europe, but maybe not that known around the world globally. And the many things and urgent things that are happening here, a periphery working for the center or for a global context. So I think these were different points that really interest us to work with.
We were excited about all these things happening in the region that are so multi-layered and entangled and complex and very urgent, of course. I mean, they're very often in many of the projects we address urgencies, but it's not like they're happening at the ground. And we feel that this region has so much happening that is very urgent, and I think art can give many contributions to understand the complexity and also to maybe tackle some of these urgencies from oblique ways that are not yet explored. And in relation to, so we were also excited about the fact that it's unknown, that we can bring a fresh perspective, that we can bring a new, maybe vision that is not so embedded in the local scene. There's disadvantages and advantages that can come from that, of course. But we felt there was this weird familiarity to processes that we have been confronted to, either in Sao Paulo or Cameroon. I mean, you've heard me talk about this demolition and replication and movement, and of course here, that has happened too, in other ways, in different ways, for different motivations. But at the core of the social and spatial processes that we're talking about, there are many similarities. So it's both unknown and new, but also kind of the same types of processes that are led by local and global interests that I think we can relate to, even if we're not from here. So it was a mix of those factors that led us to apply.
This year we had the thematics of also including, except from the arts and also the architecture. And one vocal point in your application that also was one of the reasons that you got chosen was that you talked a lot about maybe not only the built environment, how you look in architecture and how that could be interpreted in many ways. Is that something that you've been continuously thinking on while you've been here? Is there something that you would like to tell us a little bit more about, how you're thinking about the thematics that we set?
I have a background in architecture, so that resonated very directly with my interests. But I've also realized, having been educated in Europe, like in Portugal and in Switzerland, and having a really good education in architecture that I value completely, and then moving to Sao Paulo to work, I realized that there are some limitations to what we can address in the ground with the tools that architecture offers. And that is true for every discipline. So there are many limitations, and there are many things that, from my personal experience of my education, in architecture from this European perspective that did not find a place in the way that the city is built and rebuilt and the social processes take place in São Paulo. So my incursion into this curatorial practice that is a bit of a hybrid between art and architecture was also as a way to find new methodologies or maybe new strategies to, you know, pose critical questions or have some sort of traction or friction in that context in a different way. I felt from your ambitions here with the Luleåbiennale within the region that kind of we felt that those intentions were there. Like, what else can we bring to the discussion that is not there yet with all the knowledge and expertise that is around here? So that also resonated with my background.
I mean, I don't come from an architectural background, but for me it was also important to see. I've been working a lot about with space and thinking of what does it mean to create space. And I think from architecture, there's a lot to unpack there. And maybe for something that is more personal, when we were thinking of what we mentioned in the application, this idea of instability of spaces due to human actions, but also due to nature changement. Thinking of the city of Douala, for instance, really located around this river of the Vuri, but having to kind of rethink ways of structuring and moving the cities and inhabited because of inundation, floodings happening every year because of climate change, for instance, but also how the presence of the port, but also what's happening around with industry, you know, pushing people to move and also pushing kind of the sea out of from the city. So I thought there might be also something there that can, you know, resonate in both spaces. And I'm really also interested in that, this relation between inhabitant spaces and ways of building them. And I feel there's an opportunity to kind of deconstruct that from Norrbotten.
Yeah, and also you talked about a little bit, Bruno, this like that you wanted so badly tell us more about the projects that you've done, and it's hard to not continue talking about things. But also as a part of this Curator project that we've done, in another talk, we talked about a lot of this leaving the power to someone else to interpret, or like leaving the power for the room for someone else to fill it with their thoughts. And how are you thinking about that as curators and coming here and from another place and seeing this space, just the shift of power, and both, as you said earlier, like with a new perspective, but also with like learning things about this area and seeing connections. Are you thinking about that? Have you thought about that now and being here for a few days?
Yeah, I'm thinking that we've been discussing that, and it's something that's really also very much at the core of what made the many things I'm doing, and it's something that I also learned from my past experiences, is this idea of listening. I think it's a very difficult practice, and I'm not sure there are people succeeding into that. But for places where you are not from, I think there's a lot of work into listening to the people, listening to the local, to avoid kind of also representation or exoticization. And for me, what's the most important is how do we reflect and translate what's happening without using it as an opportunity to position ourselves. These are questions that also, you know, they are really present in my mind.
Yeah, but that was also be interesting hearing. Time is running up, but just as a hearing what your first thoughts after being here just a few days, of course. But if there's any thoughts that you're bringing with you in the form working forward with this project, because it's early days still. But I mean, still, just to get a little bit of an insight in what you're thinking right now after these days.
Yes, we're thinking of many things, and it's been a lot of information to digest that many of you kindly were, you know, giving us a lot of input. But So we're interested in of course, in the specificities of the region, and I mean, there's so much to unpack just regarding the region in itself that it's even a bit overwhelming. But we are also interested in kind of establishing relations between what's happening here in this location and other parts of the world that might not straightforwardly connect to Norrbotten, but that nevertheless have very similar processes happening. So we're kind of interested in understanding what are these commonalities despite the differences, and what are the what's happening otherwise. What are the responses of like resistance or solidarity or alternatives happening in the midst of process of extraction, of displacement, and so on and so forth. So we're interested in this, like, both very specific local approach, but also that does not exclude a global overview or global connections. So then we have been fascinated about the drastic changes in landscape. So the biennial will happen from March to May, and I mean, the fact that the sea is frozen and we can walk on it is just so mind-blowing for us, and for everyone that we know that we're sharing pictures with. And we think if we're talking about architecture and built environment and space, it's inevitable to tap into these drastic changes of space. And so we're still thinking of how the biennial can answer to these natural transitions in time and space and light and water and temperature. How can projects also incorporate that? So yeah, this is something that is intriguing us.
Because it's sometimes in the midst of so much urgencies and things happening, there's a sort of solitary type of feeling. So how to also show to people in the Congo, for instance, that they are not alone, right? There's also people here from the region, kind of going through the same processes or same urgencies like them. So it's also a question: can the Biennale or can this edition foster and create different type of solidarities with different places? And yeah, this idea of urgencies, we were also thinking how when you sit on the chaos, you can just think of chaos. So how do you also think of the alternative, as you say, the otherwise, the resistance, the poetry that is not an escape from the chaos, right? But which is also addressing that situation. We are thinking of also, changes of habits in relation to the changes of the seasons, the changes of landscape. And it was funny that every pictures of architecture are always pictures in the summer. So also thinking of that, right, of architecture differently in the middle of snow. It's a lot, as Bruno said, to unpack, and
yeah, we're looking forward to see that. But if there's someone that has any questions, you're welcome to ask them, and we will be here for a little bit. But otherwise, I would say thank you. And it was really nice seeing your presentation and hearing you talk a little bit about what you're bringing with you when you're leaving in a few days.
Yeah, we hope we will be in conversation throughout the whole process of this journey. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.